Is Clemson the favorite in the ACC? Well, we got on Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers, to answer that question for us.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in to Locked On ACC. I'm Jackson Holzer, filling in for Alex Dono. I am the host of Locked On Syracuse, of course, always joined by Kenton Gibbs, host of Locked On Wolfpack and former NC State defensive tackle. And on today's show, we are going to preview the Clemson Tigers, perhaps the favorite to come out of the ACC and represent the conference in the college football playoff. Should there only be one team in the ACC this upcoming season? We hope that there's more than one. But if there's only going to be one, it's likely going to be the Clemson Tigers. And here to tell us all about the Clemson Tigers is Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers. We're going to hear his thoughts, his season prediction. We're going to go over the defense. We're going to start by talking about the offense for Clemson, featuring one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. And before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Morgan, thank you so much for taking the time here to tell us all about perhaps the best team in the ACC. I want to start off with your offense. You guys got a lot of good players coming back. Let's start right there. There's at least, by my count, 5 all-conference players that are coming back to the Clemson Tigers offense, 4 of which are on the offensive line. So, Morgan, how about this one right here for you? Do the Clemson Tigers have the best offensive line in the ACC?
I think this year they could have one of the best in the country if everything, plays out the way that we're hoping under Matt Luke. So they should be one of the best in the conference for sure. They really only lost one guy in Marcus Tate to the NFL, and they're replacing him with either Elijah Thurman or Harris Sewell or Colin Sadler, who all have played that position and started at that position in the past 2 years. So, or at least last year. So, they've got returning guys that are going to fill in that hole. They've got a whole offensive line that's probably the most cohesive that they've had in years. And, they don't have any guys that I would say are like probably first-round draft picks, to be honest with you. And that's always been a frustration for Clemson fans to not have that, massive offensive lineman that's a first-round draft pick. But what they need is a few guys who are some of the best in the ACC, and I think they finally have a couple of guys that can fight for that. Blake Miller being one of those guys. Walker Parks obviously coming back, and then Tristan Lee can get in the mix as well. So you got a good handful of guys to kind of really lock it down and make Cade Klubnick's life much, much easier, because that's the key. He's the superstar.
I'm glad that you outright came out and said one of the best in the country, because Jackson's playing it way too coy. Talking about, are they perhaps the favorite in the ACC? They're by far the favorite in the ACC. That's a foregone conclusion.
I think wasn't it the ESPN FBI that had Miami there ahead of them? That was a little weird.
And to ESPN's FBI, I would say, lay off the crack. Computers on crack is not the title of your FBI. Please stop it. But no, back to you. So, in terms of everything the Clemson's offense brings, you talk about one of the best offensive lines in the nation, returning a lot of time. The wide receiver core, everybody knows it. You all are battling Ohio State for 1A, 1B, who's 1, who's 2, that type of deal. Cade Klubnick, a Heisman candidate, a guy that everybody's expecting the world of. The only question marks I'm seeing are in the backfield. Tell me what the answer is there in terms of running back, of course.
Yeah, I think that's where you're going with that. I think the, it is a big question mark replacing a 1,000-yard rusher in Phil Maffa. A lot of controversy over how he was used last season, because it ended up being where he was almost overused. Actually, I'm not even to say almost. He was overused in many scenarios, not rotated really much at all towards the end of the season. And then when you needed him in the postseason, really the most, he was injured and was falling at the first sign of contact and not what he was at the beginning of the season. So they've got to figure out a different way of doing it. And it's not that they've got to, they have no other option now because they don't have another 5-star big time guy that's ready, in my opinion. Now they do have Gideon Davidson, the best player in the state of Virginia, one of the best running backs in the country, but he's a true freshman. We know Dabo Swinney doesn't always like to throw out true freshmen unless you're Sammy Watkins. He doesn't really like to throw you out there to the fire unless you're probably the best player in the country. So is he one of those guys? Now, a lot of fans would tell me, Morgan, he is. But I know that he has 24-inch pythons. I know he looks like a man-child. I know he came on campus over 200 pounds. But he's still a true freshman, and it's still Dabo Swinney, and they still have LSU at the beginning and not just some tune-up game. So I do believe that they will go with Adam Randall. I know he's a converted wide receiver, but I do think that Cade Klubnick doesn't really need Gideon Davidson immediately. I don't think he needs an All-American running back. I don't think he needs an All-ACC running back, mainly because of what you guys have already thrown out there. The fact that he has an offensive line that can protect him and that should be one of the most veteran in the country. And then also the fact that he has more than enough wide receivers, more than the past 5 years that we've seen. There's been a little bit of a, there was a time where you're like, wow, this is wide receiver U in the T. Higgins and Mike Williams era. And then it disappeared. And it was like, what happened? And a lot of that had to do with DJ Uiagalelei. A lot of that had to do with guys just not, being good, not working out the way we thought. Now they've got a handful of guys that are already definitely guys you can count on. So you don't really need a running back to do it all or to be 1,000-yard rusher. I would be absolutely shocked if there was a 1,000-yard rusher. I'm going to say running back by committee, 3 guys, Adam Randall starting it, and then David Ezeomume, guy who hasn't had a lot of opportunity, but is going to get it now. He had a great spring. And then Gideon Davidson is that star of the future that you hope to see, in my opinion, come on later on in the season.
Morgan, you mentioned during that whole point about how Dabo Swinney doesn't necessarily like to play true freshmen unless they're one of the best players in the country. In fact, he's the same guy that did not start Trevor Lawrence right away, and he was quite literally the best player in the entire country. But Trevor Lawrence was not someone who snuck up on us. I think we all kind of had a feeling he was going to be an excellent player, and he turned out okay, ended up going number 1 of the Jacksonville Jaguars. But who do you think is someone on Clemson's offense this year that can kind of sneak up on us? Who can take that next step forward in development?
Well, I think the only guy that really is going to get that opportunity that hasn't been talked about is Gideon Davidson, because he's that guy who's going to be the highly touted freshman that's coming in a position of need. A lot of the other positions out there, wide receiver, offensive line, are so, stacked that you're not going to get a lot of freshmen in there. You could maybe see Brandon Jacobs' son play at tackle position, but tackle at the college position is difficult, even though he is also a beast, at his young age. But anybody who I think maybe might be a little bit of a shocker for the Clemson fan base would probably be Ian Shefflin, former power forward, now turned tight end. That would be probably the most shocking one to do anything on the offense, because there's a lot of veteran guys right now outside of running back.
That's very interesting there to say, hey, we're going to make that jump all the way from a super productive guy like Brennan Stu, guy who's played the position for forever today, to now we've got a basketball player for you. Let me ask you this. We've talked about the backfield. We've talked about the strengths of the offense, the weakness of the offense, all that good stuff. Where do you think that this offense ranks nationally? If you had to say, obviously we know this is going to be one of the better offenses in the ACC. If you had to give a level to, let's say, top 5, top 10, top 25, where would you expect this offense to finish in terms of production?
In terms of production, this has got to be that year. You know, every sign points to this is a contract year for Cade Klubnick. He's running out of his college contract and trying to get an NFL contract. So he's got to get that. So he's got to move on. He's got to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I could realistically see him moving up 10%, and that would be 4,000 yards passing, 40 touchdowns. If you're having something like that, you're in New York City at the end of the season and your team's one of the best offenses in the country. I could easily see that.
We are joined by Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers. I'm Jackson Holzer. That's Kenton Gibbs as well, the host of Locked On Wolfpack. Stick with us here because we just talked about Clemson's offense. We're going to come back. We're going to discuss the defense. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following along the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling, right? Maybe you're going to that baseball game with a few of your friends. You're enjoying it. It's a nice atmosphere. It's the first few innings of the game, but then all of a sudden you get to the fourth or fifth inning and you start to kind of hit a wall at a baseball game. And maybe that's where FanDuel for you can come in. And guess what? FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up because if you're new customers can bet just $5. And if they win, you get $150 in bonus bets. That's right. First $5 bet wins, you get $150 in bonus bets. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. This is Locked On ACC. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse, filling in for Alex Stano, who is still on vacation in Europe. We're, of course, always joined by Kenton Gibbs, former NC State defensive tackle and currently a co-host for Locked On Wolfpack. And we're previewing the Clemson Tigers, which means we're going to have on Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers. We just talked about their offense. Now let's shift gears to the defense with new defensive coordinator Tom Allen from Penn State. And Morgan, this is kind of a simple one. How do you think this defense is going to change with a new defensive coordinator from last season to this season?
I think it's going to go back to what Clemson really wanted to be, what Dabo Swinney wanted his defense to be, and that is just very, very aggressive. They sat back a little bit more than we were used to. They got into a point of being a pretty heavy blitzing team, and then with Wes Goodwin, it kind of dropped back. And my approach to defense, or what it seems like Clemson's approach to defense has been, it seems as if we don't want to sit back and see if we can outsmart the quarterback and outplay or out-scheme the quarterback. We would rather try to get in your face and just fluster you. And maybe you are better than our defense, but we're not going to give you time to even show that. And I think that's what Brent Venables did, and he instilled in the defense. And we lost that a little bit over the past couple of years, sitting back, letting the quarterback figure out what they want to do. Yes, Wes Goodwin is very smart, but we found out more often than not that he was getting out-coached or the defense was not being able to rise to the occasion. So I'd like to see a little bit more of the fundamentals, a little bit more of the better footwork and the better angles taken. They were really having a difficult time with missed tackles, arm tackles sliding through, guys getting to the second level. One of the worst rush defenses in the country as far as compared to what they had been in the past. So they've got to get back to that. The front seven should be really good, but it all goes back to fundamentals and aggressiveness. And I think that's what Tom Allen is going to bring in. From the very onset of his first interview, it was really awesome to see because he feels like an extension of Dabo Swinney. And whatever Dabo has done to adjust has been, to me, the smartest thing. Maybe it was something that fans wanted and he didn't do at the beginning. But as you get older, as you get to the top of the mountain, you want to surround yourself with, it's much easier to surround yourself with guys who can self-manage and self-coach and self-lead. When you hire guys from within who've never done that position or never been in that role, then you have to do a lot more as the head coach. You have to mentor and follow through on so much more. Now, Matt Luke He's a head coach himself. He doesn't need any help. He can use a little bit of bouncing ideas off of everyone, but you don't have to tell him what to do. He knows how to run a whole program. Tom Allen, same thing. You don't have to hold his hand. He knows how to run an entire program. So these two guys are going to help free up Dabo Swinney to be able to do what he does best, which is be the CEO instead of being the developmental guy. We saw what he wanted to do. Unfortunately, 3 years down the road, didn't really work out. Now, this path, I think, will work out for him going forward. So, to me, Tom Allen was a great hire, fits everything. And then getting in Ben Boulware, from a Clemson fan standpoint, having a guy that's a national champion, that's a hometown hero as far as football goes, and, someone who is a cheerleader on the team, I think is going to help, pay dividends. He is saying that the new motto for the defense is Limp Bizkit's break stuff. And so that's the kind of aggression we want to bring.
So let me ask you this. This defense, stars at every level. Avion Terrell, the little brother of AJ, a guy that's projected to be drafted highly next year. Linebacking core, Wade Woodaz, Sammy Brown, who, by the way, love me some Sammy Brown. Every time I watch his film, he's one of those guys, the more I watch it, the more I like. The more I'm like, oh, this kid, he's got all the goods. And then defensive line. You throw a rock in that defensive line room, you're probably going to hit a first rounder somewhere along the lines there in terms of Woods and Parker, both on that defensive line together. And even the young man that you just got from Purdue, who I know they got to be crying, shaking, and throwing up. The only player they had that was worth a damn is now playing in Clemson, South Carolina. What an evil world we live in. Which group do you see as the best of those three?
Oof, man, if you're looking at from top to bottom, I'd have to say the defensive line. You've got TJ Parker and Peter Woods, who, if they have the season that we're expecting, will be drafted in the first round, in my opinion. Will Helt, who is a all-conference player on the defensive end, now has 3 years to go and is part of the team and going to be part of the team of the future. DeMonte Capehart's a returning senior who you didn't think you were going to get, but is a guy you don't need to tell what to do. He knows exactly what to do at the defensive tackle position. So, and then behind them, you have some newer faces that nobody's really heard about, but that are electric in Amari Adams and Ari Watford and a few other guys like Darian Mayo. A lot of guys who just haven't had their opportunity yet, just going to have to wait their time. And that is what happens at Clemson with the defensive line. If you join, and it seems like they don't have a problem getting high recruits, but it's rare that you're going to get immediate playing time. You have to be willing to wait your time. But when you wait your time and you get through the program, more often than not, they end up being a high draft pick. So that defensive line, to me, should be one of the best, in the country, and I think should be the best unit for me. The weakest unit, if you're going to ask me that, I would say probably the secondary.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny you mentioned the defensive line, because my next question was going to be specifically about Will Helt. The fact that Clemson doesn't usually take transfers, but they do make an exception every once in a while. Will Helt is definitely one of those exceptions. What are your expectations for him this season and beyond?
Dabo Swinney has taken many transfers. They just happen to be guys that turn into accountants and graduate assistants. They don't happen to be anybody that actually does anything. They happen to be guys that maybe, are there to get their degree, I guess. But, right now you're looking at Will Helt and him coming in. That was a shocker to me, to be honest with you, because I did not expect Clemson to win against Texas A&M. There must have been something else there outside of money. And what we do find out, and I'm sure you guys with your teams find out, there are definitely guys who just want the money. But there are still a large majority of families who they want their children to play close to home, or they want their children to play for a coach that they trust. They want them to go to a university that they feel like is valuable. They want them to be around other players that are good and talented, and be around coaches that are proven. And so the culture, the family, the everything all wrapped together. There's still a ton of players out there that care about that. And Clemson also is, has success winning a lot of games. So that helps too. They can compete. I don't know what the money value was on it, but it must have been competitive enough, because when you go in and you go to the transfer portal, that was the thing everybody doubted about Dabo, was he's not going to go into the portal and just drop money on somebody that doesn't already wear the jersey. And I didn't think that either. I thought Dabo he's very, very public about, hey, I'm going to invest in the guys that already invested in me and in our university. But to bring in new guys like this that haven't wore the uniform has been new, a new world for Clemson. But what I've noticed with the three guys that they took that are actually, we think, going to get a lot of playing time, they all have something that you're not worried about them in the locker room. You've got Will Helt, who is a star in his own right in his previous team, but they only won one game last year. So he's trying to get on a team to prove that he can do it and help a team completely. He wants to be a part of a team that can win, not just an individual. So that fits great. You've got Jeremiah Alexander, a former 5-star guy, basically was a bust as far as a recruit goes, has played nothing, went to Alabama, left Dabo Swinney at the altar, as Dabo says in the recruiting world, at the very last minute, chose the Tide. Didn't work out for him. Now he's coming to Clemson for his second chance at an opportunity to move on to the NFL and get developed and show what he can do. So that's a guy you want in your locker room with that kind of attitude. And then Tristan Smith, a guy who almost was a 1,000-yard receiver at a lower university in Southeast Missouri State, who's basically just saying, I need an opportunity. I'm so thankful that he's so thankful that Clemson gave him that opportunity. So you've got guys that I think in the past Dabo was worried about, but now are building upon, a good culture that can help them get to the next level.
Well, that just about does it. Talking about the Clemson Tigers offense and defense. Coming up, season prediction time. Where does Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers, have his own team finishing within the conference? Find out next on Locked On ACC. This is Locked On ACC. I'm Jackson Holzer, Kenton Gibbs, and we're joined by Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers. And when you're done watching or listening to this podcast, you can do us all a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for all our channels. Locked On Clemson with Morgan Thomas. If you're a Clemson fan, hey, this is perfect for you. You're listening to Morgan Thomas right now. Maybe this is the first time you are discovering Morgan Thomas. You're going to want to pay attention to Locked On Clemson Tigers, because he's going to talk about your team literally every single day. And of course, Locked On Syracuse with myself and Kenton Gibbs with Locked On Wolfpack. We're still going here though. Season prediction for the Clemson Tigers. Morgan, this is a softball right here. How many games are they going to win the regular season?
It's not really a softball, It actually is something that I feel a little superstitious about predicting wins and losses before the season. Should I go the route of saying they're going to lose more games than I really think they're going to lose in order to reverse jinx the team so that they don't do that? Maybe I say they stubbed their toe against LSU. Maybe I say they stubbed their toe against Syracuse because that's a pay me back game for allowing them to get to the ACC. Maybe I say they stubbed their toe against SMU that wants a revenge game. Maybe I say that Friday night game that's scaring me a little bit in Louisville is going to be another one. There's this schedule. And a lot of people outside the ACC like to pick on the ACC. Oh, they're no good, this and that. But you look at the schedule and you look at the teams, it's a respectable schedule. It's got a lot of teams from August all the way through that are going to be a big time challenge for Clemson. I do not expect there to be an undefeated season. I'd love to say that. But the reality in that the time of college football that we're in, it's more and more difficult as we go. To me, I do have some concerns about Louisville. I feel like a Friday night game away from home, road games, as they always say, are very, very difficult to win, and especially road conference games in November. And so that one is one that I've got a big circle around and I'm worried about. I'm not worried about South Carolina. Sorry, guys. I'm not. I feel like that's a win. Lenore Sellers, he got his chance and he won, but they're not going to let it happen in their house for sure. So I think Clemson's going to go down there and continue the streak in their house. Hopefully, come back next season and right the ship. LSU also a very difficult one to predict because when I came out and said they had a better team, man, the entire nation of the LSU Tigers came down on me in the comments and reminded me that LSU also has a pretty stout defense and a good quarterback and a team that is ready to compete. Last time Brian Kelly came to Death Valley, the real Death Valley in Clemson, South Carolina, his eyeballs were extremely wide, looked like a deer in headlights, and Notre Dame walked away from the Hurricane with a loss. So LSU and Brian Kelly are in for a big challenge at the beginning of the season against Clemson. I'm going to say not an undefeated season. I'll go with one loss. That's what I'm going to say. One loss. I don't know which one, but I will go with one. It won't hurt them in the ACC championship game, and it won't hurt them to get into the playoffs. But I do not think that they go undefeated.
Okay, so you got them finishing 11-1 in the regular season. Let me ask you this: how far does this team go in the playoffs? You know we were going to ask. You knew we were going to ask. How far does this team go? Is this a national champion, or is this it will be nice to get a spot. It'll be nice to be there.
It's the best chance Clemson has had since Trevor Lawrence. I think that it's the contract year for Cade Klubnick. He's got to do it, and they need to get to the playoffs. Can they win and get to the national championship? A lot of that depends on all the other teams around there, but they should be able to have an opportunity to get there. My feeling is that they can make it with this roster. You mentioned already earlier, the biggest question mark is kind of the running back room. I would say even bigger question mark for me is how well this secondary does, because you got Ricardo Jones and Kylan Griffin, two guys that are guys that are really going to have to grow up very, very fast in the safety in the very end of the defense. So we don't want a lot of big plays to happen because our safeties are not in position. So if they are going to make it far, I think to me, it's all about how that secondary holds up against some of the most dangerous passing offenses.
So Morgan, there's one game though that you didn't really mention though on that schedule. I think might trip you guys up.
All right.
At Georgia Tech. That one's very sneaky. Because Georgia Tech, I think, is one of the sneaky teams in the ACC this year. I think they were better than their record says they were a year ago. And that's mainly because A, Haynes King was hurt for part of the year. And B, they had an absolutely brutal schedule to the point where it was very hard to even see Georgia Tech go 9-3 a year ago. But this year, I think they could be pretty good. But going back to your prediction, if Clemson is an 11-1 team this year in the regular season, which I definitely think is on the table, I'd probably pick them at 10-2. But if they go 11-1, like you say, they're definitely a national title contender. Like no doubt about it, because think about the teams that they would be beating to go 11-1. And then you forecast it to the college football playoff. They would have a legitimate chance there, in my opinion.
I do think, like I said, if you look at this schedule from top to bottom, there's not a month that doesn't have a team that kind of makes you a little nervous. And that's my biggest concern with this team, is because as you get into the longevity of the season, you're talking about postseason getting into late January or mid-January, I guess. You're talking about a team that's got to stay healthy. And if you're having to play tight games, you're having to continue playing your starters. And as you mentioned, September, Georgia Tech, I would even put Syracuse. I do not want to look past Fran Brown, even though it's at home. I do not want to look past the fact that he's going to rile his team up and say, hey, we got them into the ACC championship game. Now it's our time to get that payback, like I said, LSU in August, SMU in October. The schedule definitely has one team at least every month to kind of make you nervous.
This has been Locked On ACC. Thank you so much to Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers, talking all things Clemson for the upcoming 2025 college football season. And hey, if you're a Clemson fan, or maybe you're an ACC fan in general, check out Locked On Clemson with Morgan Thomas and hit that like button and hit that subscribe button so that all Clemson fans know Locked On Clemson Tigers. And of course, if you're just an ACC fan in general, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, helps the channel grow to reach all ACC fans. We'll be back soon with another conference preview. So stick with us here on Locked On ACC.